Hello and welcome to Over the Garden Fence. My name is Ron Allen. I'm a University of California Master Gardener in Mariposa County. We're located in the Central Sierra foothills of California. Some of you may not know who Master Gardeners are and what we do. We are University of California trained volunteers who provide science-based information, education, and general advice to the public on many topics. For example, fruit and vegetable cultivation, pest management, native plant gardening, sustainable landscaping, and just any agricultural or horticultural concerns whatsoever. Today's topic is going to be on cultivating by seeds the native milkweeds in the Asclepias genus of California. There are 6 species of Asclepias genus milkweeds found in Mariposa County. These are the narrowleaf milkweed, Asclepias fascicularis, the showy milkweed, Asclepias speciosa. A somewhat rare milkweed that was historically found in Mariposa County is the woolly pod milkweed, Asclepias areocarpa. And then there's the very attractive purple milkweed or heartleaf milkweed, Asclepias cordifolia. 2 rather exotic looking milkweeds that are also found in Mariposa and surrounding counties are the California milkweed, Asclepias californica, and the woolly milkweed, Asclepias vestita. There are 2 other milkweeds that are found in Northern California. These are the fairly rare serpentine milkweed, or Asclepias solano-ana, which is found in the North Coast mountain ranges. And then there's a fairly widespread milkweed. It grows in the drier areas of the Great Basin in North America, called the Humboldt Mountain milkweed or pallid milkweed. Its scientific name is Asclepias cryptoceras, and its western range touches into California, and in the east, the drier areas of eastern California, north of Mono Lake and south of the Tahoe Basin. People will ask, why are milkweeds so important? Well, they have a special relationship with the monarch butterfly. The monarch butterflies only lay their eggs on Asclepias genus milkweeds. Why is that? Well, the milkweeds are toxic plants. If you break the milkweed in any place, a stem or a leaf, it oozes out a kind of a white milky latex. The latex is a toxic liquid, sticky liquid. It contains chemical compounds called cardiac glycosides, and these affect heart rhythm. They affect heart rhythm so severely that if you're a predator, a potential predator of a monarch, such as a bird or a mouse or a lizard or a snake, and you ingest a caterpillar or a butterfly, you could actually have a bird or mouse heart attack. So the bright coloration of the monarch butterfly caterpillars and the monarch butterfly are sort of warning signs. It's called aposematic coloration in the parlance. These tell predators, don't eat me, I'm toxic, you will get sick and possibly die if you ingest me. After laying their eggs on the milkweeds, the eggs hatch, become caterpillars. The caterpillars basically devour the milkweeds. They'll clean out the foliage on a milkweed patch, and that's how they absorb the toxin into their bodies, become toxic themselves. They go through a pupal stage. After the pupal stage, the butterfly emerges. It's a toxic butterfly, again brightly colored, always telling the predators, don't eat me, I'm toxic. If you can learn to cultivate native California milkweeds, you can provide food sources for the monarch butterfly caterpillars and help to preserve the species. Many people are aware that the monarch populations have plummeted dramatically in California over the last several years. So let's take a look at how exactly you go about propagating the native California milkweeds by seed. Now, it turns out that just scattering milkweed seeds isn't a very successful technique for seed propagation of the Asclepias genus plants. What you have to do is a procedure called cold-wet stratification. You wet the seeds in a paper towel or a coffee filter, that's what I use. Fold the coffee filter over, put it in a plastic bag, into the refrigerator. Don't freeze it, let it be, say, in the butter compartment is perfect if you've got room in there. Otherwise, the vegetable compartments at the bottom of a refrigerator work well, or just on any shelf, not too close to the freezer so that the seeds get scorched by the cold. That takes anywhere from 1 month to 2 months depending upon the milkweed species. Once you do that, you can plant them in germination soil, and your germination rate will be anywhere from 75 to 95% success. Very good compared to scattering the seeds on the ground. I've done that, and I haven't done any good at all in milkweed propagation by scattering seeds. Seed balls, mud balls, you can buy those. Never worked for me. The only thing that's worked is the procedure I'm going to show this afternoon. Okay, let's talk about collecting milkweed seeds. The milkweeds produce seeds in large pods. This is an example of a California milkweed pod. It's got a little hairband wrapped around it to keep it from exploding open. Inside there's some white fluff. That's called, in botanical terminology, that's called pappus. The word comes from the ancient Greek word papos, which means grandfather or old man. I can't begin to guess what the connection is. But this helps disperse the seeds in the wind, you know, when the pods burst open. California milkweed, like this particular pod here, these pods will ripen in July and August. A little bit later comes the woolly milkweed. After that, heartleaf milkweed, and then the other milkweeds that we have in Mariposa County, narrowleaf, showy, and woolly pod. Their pods ripen in the early fall, September and October. When you find a milkweed pod that you're going to harvest, take one pod off of a plant by a roadside or on private property. Leave the rest of the pods on the plant. Each pod contains anywhere from 30 to 75 or 80 seeds, so that's plenty to do some good seed propagation of these Asclepias genus milkweeds. You should never, ever, ever try to dig up a milkweed. They have a very deep taproot. That's how they survive as green plants throughout the hot California summer. If you try to dig up the plant, you will sever that taproot and harm the root system to such an extent that it's extremely unlikely that the milkweeds will survive. The right thing to do is to collect the seeds in the pod and then do the cold wet stratification. Here's another seed pod. This is from a showy milkweed. The seeds are smaller. They're dark brown, which indicates that the seeds have fully matured. If you happen to pick a pod that's a little bit raw, unripe, it'll be firm and green to the touch. As it begins to ripen, it will turn a little bit yellow and maybe brownish. And when the seeds are ready to be dispersed from the pod, it'll split like this showy milkweed pod here is right now. And within a day or two, the seeds will just blow out of it into the wind and be scattered. So one trick you can use if you happen to find a target milkweed where you want to harvest a pod is to put a hairband or a rubber band around the pod like I'm showing here. This will keep the pod from bursting open, and you can come back in a couple of weeks and find your milkweed pod safe and secure, full of seeds and a little bit of pappus right there on the plant. If you get there a little bit too early, you can't come back. It's also possible to cut the stem of the milkweed that has a pod or two on it that you might want to take. Put the stem into a vase of water. In a couple of weeks, the pods on that stem will begin to split open, and you can get the milkweed seeds. If they're dark brown, ready to go. If they're still kind of yellowish, you've probably got immature seeds and you won't have much luck. So let's go to the cold stratification steps right now. Take a look at how to do that. The first step is to do antifungus treatment of the milkweed seeds. You can skip this if you want, but I've never had a problem, but other master gardeners and milkweed enthusiasts have told me that they have had problems with fungi in milkweed seed stratification. This is Daconil from the garden center. You mix it, if it's concentrated, approximately 1 teaspoon per gallon of water, and pour a little bit into a used Tupperware dish. Grab a coffee filter or a paper towel. I generally use coffee filters. It has to be fairly strong paper that you can wet without it deteriorating and completely falling apart. Get it wet, shake off a little bit of excess Daconil mix, lay it down onto your working surface, paper plate, or in this case a small cutting board, and then the seeds that you're going to stratify. These have been stored in the refrigerator nice and cold since the time that you collected them back in the late summer or early fall. Scatter them onto the coffee filter. All done. I've got a label here that says what the species is, what the ecotype is. These happen to be California milkweeds from Contra Costa County. Plants. Spread out the seeds on the paper towel. A little bit of breeze picking up here. Fold it over. That's good. Fold it over again. Ready to go into the butter compartment. I've got a labeled bag here all ready to go with the date of stratification on it. I use old business cards for making notes about the seeds in stratification. Goes into the plastic Ziploc bag. Seal it up. Make sure you can read the label. You can easily mix up seeds. Don't do that. You want to know what you've got, where it should go. You can stack these up, one on top of the other, into a Tupperware dish or some kind of sealed plastic container. Put it in the refrigerator, or you can put the individual plastic bags into the butter compartment themselves. You're ready to go. Now the stratification starts. In this case, I'm doing California milkweed, so its stratification period is 1 month, 4 weeks. All the other milkweeds are 4-week stratification, with the exception of Asclepias vestita, woolly milkweed, and Asclepias cordifolia, heartleaf milkweed. Those milkweeds require 8 weeks at least of stratification in order to successfully germinate. Okay, let me discuss how to build up your germination soil. We've just gone through a time warp. You know, it's 4 weeks or 8 weeks since we did our stratification of the seeds in the refrigerator. I've got a visitor right now. The soil mix that I use is what I call Foothill Native Mix. It consists of 2 parts of raised bed plant mix that you get at the garden center, 1 part each of perlite and clean sand. I say clean sand. You don't necessarily have to get place sand at the hardware store or the garden center. You can get construction sand, but you just don't want to get sand that's come out of a gold mining operation or something nasty like that. You mix these together, and that's your basic soil that you're going to use for milkweed seed germination. The pots that you'll use for germination once the seeds come out of the refrigerator, this is a fairly new item, a cow pot made out of cow manure. You can plant it directly into the ground The other container that I use quite a bit is this small square container with the Anderson bands on the bottom. The square shape of the container encourages the milkweed seeds to grow downward and not around as they would in a circular container. And when the milkweed is ready to plant into the ground or into a larger container, you've got finger holes where you can kind of push the root ball out with the milkweed. I recommend the Anderson bands if you can afford to buy them. The other thing, you can go frugal. You can just get a party cup, drill holes in the bottom to allow plenty of water filtration through the soil in the container. Milkweeds don't like to be waterlogged at all. And then finally, there's the Jiffy Pot, kind of an older system for germinating seeds. It consists of pressed peat moss. The good thing about these Jiffy Pots is they absorb the water, keep the milkweed root ball fairly dry, but the bad thing is that they absorb the water sometimes too much and dry out the root ball. And you can plant these directly in the ground when you're ready to establish your milkweed patch. That does it for the containers. The next thing I'm going to show is how to actually plant the milkweed from the germination container into a large pot. Okay, here's a couple of germinated milkweeds. There's a California milkweed here on my left and a woolly milkweed here on the right. When you fill the Anderson bands with soil, you kind of want to poke your fingers down fairly firmly so that the holes in the bands at the bottom, the soil doesn't leak out through there. Once you do that, you kind of fill the Anderson band container fairly loosely with soil. You leave about an inch or so, 2 centimeters, of empty space on the top. Place 1 or 2 seeds into the container. Cover it over with about a ½ inch of the Foothill Natives mixed soil that we just saw how to prepare, and then wet them down very good. Put them on a heat mat or in a warm place because they just went through cold, wet stratification. It's the warmth of the heat mat or the sunny spot in the garage that is going to make the seeds pop and germinate. It takes about 5 or 6 weeks after the seeds are planted in soil in a warm location for the germination to occur. Once the plants are about as tall as the container is deep, they're ready to go into the ground or into a larger container. Okay, so now we're going to try to transplant the seedlings that have germinated from our seed propagation procedures. We've got a woolly milkweed and a California milkweed here ready to go. They're a little bit small for transplanting at this point because it's early March in Mariposa County. I much prefer that these plants be about as high as the depth of the germination container, but just to show you what the procedure is, we're going to take you through it right now. You start out with a clean 1 gallon number 1 nursery container. You pour in a little bit of the Foothill Native mix that we covered in the earlier section of this video. Pack it down so that it covers the holes in the container. And then on top of that, there occurs a small layer, a thin layer, perhaps 1/4 of an inch thick, of clean sand. What we've done is we've created a reservoir for holding moisture at the bottom of the container, and then a water porous layer of sand above that, so that the plant can decide whether it has enough moisture and stop its rooting at the sand layer, or if it needs more moisture, the roots can penetrate down into the reservoir of moist soil at the bottom. Now it's time to put the plant in the container. We're going to start with the California milkweed here. It should be a little bit bigger, like I mentioned. It's too small right now. What you would do is you would slice around the square walls of the Anderson band container. Tilt the plant over, catch it in your hand, drop it into the number 1 nursery container, and then fill around it with native plant mix. Down below there's a layer of sand. Down below that there's a layer of foothill native mix. Pack it in a little bit, not too firmly. You can add a little bit of gravel. This makes the plant a little bit happier. Continue adding the foothill natives mix to the container. Looking good. A little bit more gravel. It can be pea gravel like I'm showing here, or it can be sharp gravel, like you might cover your driveway with. Keep filling it in. A little bit more gravel. Good. Cover it over. Very good. Doesn't matter if you smother the plant, you're going to water it in, clear all that dirt off. The final thing that I recommend that you do once the plant is in the container is to put a layer of sand on top, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch below the rim of the container. A little bit of the rest of your pea gravel. And then you water it in very, very thoroughly. In order to eliminate air holes, and pack the soil and sand around the plant's roots, and to allow the sand and gravel mixture on the top to kind of penetrate down into the top layer of soil. That's a simulation of the kind of layering that plants encounter in a natural environment, and it allows the plant some adaptability while it lives inside this container. The plants can survive. Native California milkweeds, the 6 species that we've considered, can survive for up to 3 years perhaps inside a 1-gallon container, a little bit longer, up to 5 or 6 years in a number 3 or number 5 container. And eventually you should put them into the ground where their roots can penetrate deeper. The plants will be happier. They will thrive at that point. So that's all there is to native California milkweed seed propagation. There's a lot of steps, and it's a certain amount of time and patience involved, but if you're successful, and I think you will be if you try to follow these steps as I've described them, you'll be helping to provide habitat for the monarch butterfly caterpillars. Thanks for listening.